The modern advisor shows up at work every day wearing two hats. We're teaching money as a language because none of us, including me, is fluent in money as a language.
How should that advisor enter that conversation?
Okay, such a wonderful question.
Would you recommend asking those types of questions at the end? Would you recommend sending it?
I'm actually pretty bullish on the positive impact that AI can make for the advice business.
How would you recommend starting it from nothing?
The meaning of our lives comes through story, not spreadsheets.
It seems like you're helping advisors future-proof themselves.
For the investment manager who might want to be leaning into financial planning, I think there's got to be some
Brian Portnoy is a pioneer in the financial advising space. He's the founder of Shaping Wealth, which helps advisors integrate some of the most important, often overlooked skills into their practice by becoming better communicators around the behavioral finance and the emotional intelligence part of talking to clients. Advisors, they're transforming their client relationships and they're creating much deeper relationships as well. The things that we talk about today are going to enhance your client satisfaction, and it's going to help future-proof advisors in a fast-changing landscape that we're in right now. So in this episode, you'll learn how to future-proof your practice by mastering the human-first advice, then some of the frameworks to use when you're actually communicating and talking with clients, then how to increase your clients' overall contentment with money and also with life, and then how AI is going to play a role in this, how AI is going to impact our industry so we can be prepared and be ready and start, we don't get left behind. So in this episode, I dig really deep into the practical and some of the actionable things that we can actually start doing right away in our next meeting with Brian. So he helps engage with that. So let me know if you like this episode, leave a comment below. And then really, if you're an advisor, this channel is for you. And by the way, if I haven't met you yet, I'm Dave and I run an advisory practice in the west suburbs of Chicago, and we're growing rapidly. And we're sharing all of the success that we're finding, and then also some of the failures, a lot of the failures that we're finding. And we're sharing it on this channel and in the email newsletter. So sign up for the weekly newsletter if you haven't already, so you don't miss anything coming up next week. Now, let's get into the episode. The way that I see it, you're helping, and this could be off, but I'd like you to correct me. It seems like you're helping advisors future-proof themselves with specifically around the skills that we hear. If we go on LinkedIn or go on wherever, Facebook or whatever we're doing, we hear about these skills around human first advice, right? Or around the behavioral financial advice, right? And it seems like you're training advisors in that way. You're helping improve their skills so that they can have a deeper relationship with clients. And really the end goal, it seems like transforming clients from fear and worry to more of I don't know if it's abundance, but more happiness and contentment. I've heard the good word a few times. Where am I accurate? Is that way off?
Dave, everything that you said is accurate, and it's, I think, helpful to step back a little bit and think about where this industry's been over the last couple generations. I joke that we're on a 50-year arc from Gordon Gekko to Brene Brown, that this was a hard-charging, sales-oriented industry that has become one that is much more focused on people and relationships. And so to me, the modern advisor shows up at work every day wearing two hats as mechanic and guide, as a technical expert in various dimensions of planning, investing in markets, insurance, estates, taxes, you name it. But then in helping others, away from technical expertise, helping others navigate life's changes. Change is inevitable, usually unpredictable. And by some estimates, we go through 30 or 40 transitions and disruptions in life. Many of them have a financial component. And even if they don't, it's fair game in the modern advice profession. And so on that guidance side of things, away from the mechanic side, my career over the last 15 years, what I've built at Shaping Wealth, is about training the guides, and even more specifically, training the guides on the journey toward funded contentment. This is, go into it if you like, but this is my concept for true wealth. The idea that true wealth is the ability to underwrite a life that's meaningful to you, however you choose to define that. And that's juxtaposed to just being rich which is the search for more. And one thing about getting more is that when you get it, you want more. It just never ends. So really working with advisors and their clients on wealth as a mindset that is sustainable over time.
So are you when people are working with you and they're going through some of your programs, does it start within with the advisor before they learn to have the external type conversations with their clients around this? Or here's the thing, and this would be maybe ego for me or many other advisors out there. I might think, oh, I care about my clients very much. I want to have deeper relationships and deeper talks with them. And I do, I won't talk about just financial all the time. Is that ever a barrier to where I'm like, I'm pretty good at this. I think I'm doing this already. I got this handled. How do I know if I'm really doing it? You know what I mean?
Oh, so no,
How can I measure?
I'm smiling because you've framed the problem and the opportunity sort of perfectly. Um, uh, Many advisors don't lack confidence, and the industry has very high retention rates. So, whether it's 99% or 97%, when a client works with you and they get through the first year or two, they tend to stick with you for a long period of time. And so I think the received message or lesson could be, oh, well, I'm really good at this. They love me. They're not leaving me. They're sticking with me for years. And it's not necessarily the case that because they are staying with you, that they are having as good of an experience as they can. It's not necessarily clear that you are creating referral worthy experiences that can really drive significant growth for your business. And so you touched on something at the beginning of your question that I want to drill into that's critical for understanding what human first, human centric, or behavioral advice is. And I'm using those interchangeably: human first, human centric, behavioral. Dancing on the head of a pin a little bit, and we're not going to get wrapped up with definitions and taxonomies. Um, the thing about human first advice is that it actually starts the advisor as a human. And so like the programming that we create and, deep dive immersive coaching, free content, bite-sized content, and everything in between, there are elements of it that really lean into, well, who is the advisor to begin with? We talk about training player coaches on the journey toward funded contentment. Yes, you're a technical expert. Yes, you can help others along the way, but guess what? Advisors are people too, and they want funded contentment. They want true wealth. And one thing we've learned now in working with literally thousands of advisors, we've got clients on 6 continents. We've learned that when you even spend a little bit of time delving into an advisor's backstory, their money story, their values, basically engaging them in some of the discovery that they then engage with their clients, you open up a really warm and inviting space for an advisor to come to even clearer terms on why are they doing this to begin with? What are the implications for the type of practice that you want to run, the size of the practice, the types of clients that you work with, the colleagues that you bring on board. All of that tends to be an outcome and usually a subconscious set of decisions based on where your money story brought you along to. And that is not trivial. It's not woo woo or squish. It's, hey, let's think about your own path and why this is important to you. And let's use that as a moment of learning and self awareness, but then also a business building opportunity because you do, as you refer to, you want to build deeper relationships. You want to be empathic. When you get into the nuances of emotional intelligence, which is the core of what we teach financial advisors, you see very powerfully that self awareness is fuel in the tank for empathy. And advisors who haven't necessarily explored what's driving them won't necessarily lean into the client experience as well as they can otherwise. Mm.
Is that, I don't know what the right saying is, but spending time in a room alone with your thoughts is something that not many people do. I know that's not what you're talking about, but just that being self-aware and that kind of inner work, uh, is there a barrier? Is that difficult for advisors? A certain type of personality, generalizing
Eh,
that these advisors. Is that hard to do, to get into that self-work at this
It
point?
can be. So, I published a book with Josh Brown a few years ago called How I Invest My Money. And it was a book of 25 money stories from financial advisors and financial experts. And in editing those chapters, I observed something really important, which is that even for people who have deep technical and even wisdom about money, writing down how they invest, how they save, spend, give, borrow, it's actually a real process to get there. It's not always easy to say out loud, well, this is important to me, and these are the types of decisions that I make. Fast forward from that book to some of the things that we do at Shaping Wealth, because we run storytelling workshops, storytelling. I say all the time, we weren't born as calculators, we're born as storytellers. Point that's largely lost on the wealth management industry that tends to think of us as numerical. We tend to think that there's a right answer that could be baked into a spreadsheet. And that's simply not true, that the meaning of our lives comes through story, not spreadsheets. And so the edited volume with Josh leading into a whole variety of money story engagements, with Shaping Wealth, we've worked with hundreds of advisors on their money story. And I would say somewhere between 80 and 90% of the advisors we meet have never once written down why money is important to them. Never once. The first sentence they write with us in our guided exercises is the first time they've ever reflected on their backstory, what their influences were, things they're struggling with now, what they're dreaming about in the future. And the feedback, I'm not going to name names, but there's some pretty prominent people in the book with Josh, had some very interesting conversations, but also in our practice at Shaping Wealth, so many advisors saying, this was super uncomfortable. It was hard to do. You guided me along. You didn't say, here's a blank piece of paper. Tell your money story. No, we've got prompts and, there's better and worse ways to go through this exercise. And what we frequently hear is, well, yeah, that was hard, but boy, am I glad that I did it. Um, I learned something about myself, but also it dawns on them, wait a minute, these are the same questions I'm asking of my clients. And it kind of never occurred to me what discomfort I was putting them in. When self-awareness is the engine for empathy, it all clicks.
So that's one of the kind of tangible outcomes, isn't just the benefit to the self and the more knowledge internally, but also how to externally have that conversation in a better way because you know what they're feeling and thinking as you're having it with them.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, empathy, there's a little bit of misunderstanding around empathy. Empathy is not necessarily walking in somebody else's shoes. So, for example, um, my parents are both alive. I haven't had to mourn them to feel that grief. I have lots of friends who have lost one or both of their parents. Um, I can't feel what they're feeling, which isn't to say that I can't take the perspective of the emotions that they're feeling in terms of grief, sadness, anger, whatever the things are that allows me to show up, in that personal context as a friend and someone to support them. Or if you're thinking about a professional relationship as a coach, as a guide, as an advisor. So yeah, it's really, so much of our emotional lives is about the words we use. I think one of the mistakes we've made in our industry over the course of a generation is that we conflate financial literacy with emotional literacy. They're both really hard, but the fact that we don't distinguish them means that, we're trying to teach youngsters, young adults, even adults, how to balance a checkbook. What does it mean to take on debt? The hundreds of things you would learn in a FinLit program without even delving into the fact that money is the most emotional topic in our lives. And that's proven out by survey after survey. So fear, greed, hope, anger, sadness, regret, happiness. These are all deep emotions that are triggered through the emotional lightning rod that is money. But until we build the vocabulary to talk about these things, we can't really access them. There's a wonderful line from a sociolinguist from years ago, Wittgenstein. He said, the limits of my language define the limits of my world. Until we build the financial literacy and the emotional literacy jointly, it's going to be really hard to be that conversation partner with that client to dig deeper on the relationship. In some ways, what we've been doing at Shaping Wealth, which sort of, I don't know, guys, it doesn't make sense unless I give the preamble, is that we're teaching money as a language because none of us, including me, is fluent in money as a language.
Can I share a scenario that happened here and get your advice on it? If you
Yeah,
have advice
absolutely.
related to this, it's a, one of our advisors here, a client's husband passed away recently, and they had a wonderful conversation, obviously very sad conversation. This is practical advice, asking you, how would how can an advisor broach that? Or are they thinking through questions to ask, or is it just presence? They get the news, my husband just passed away. We've been working together for 5 years. How should that advisor enter that conversation?
Okay. Such a wonderful question. So, empathy has, many dimensions to it. And we've kind of thought through the different steps to it. I mean, this is partly going to be a function of how you know them, how well you know them, how long you've known them. Um, Especially in situation where there's beef. Um, Platitudes probably aren't, most useful. What's most useful is creating a space where someone feels like they can speak their mind or just not say anything and that you're there to support them. And so the ability to actually not speak, to ask questions that aren't overly probing, um, to sort of as a rhetorical technique to play back to them the emotions that they are expressing, which is very validating, especially in grieving moments, but it's validating in sort of normal times as well. Basically, uh, by reframing and replaying it back to say, I've heard you and I've understood you, um, as opposed to, hey, it's all going to be okay, or, sort of higher level things like that. So, you know, creating space, embracing silence, selective question asking, not interrupting, and to repeat one of the things, being able to sit with quiet is really, really hard to do. You made an allusion at, beginning of the conversation, I think, to a 17th century French mathematician, Blaise Pascal, who said that um, our we are unable to sit in a quiet room by ourselves for very long. It drives us absolute bonkers. That's not that quote. That's the spirit of it. And so, creating a space where they can emote is hard to do, but can be incredibly powerful.
That's helpful. Um, you mentioned funded contentment a few times, and I think I'm getting that, or the understanding so far is
Mm.
more than money, more than rich. It's more the different forms of wealth. And so funded it makes me think of money, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Contentment, not money. So they're they're related. Can you is that one? I know you kind of work or think or teach in some frameworks or mental models
Mm.
to help advisors know what to do or say or kind of think in certain scenarios.
Yep.
Can you share a little bit more about the funded contentment um, and how I can help clients with that or any other mental models that you use or frameworks?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we're just a department store filled with mental models and frameworks. So,
Cool.
there's a lot that I could bring to bring to bear. The funded contentment concept is really important, and I appreciate you asking the way that you did, because it's just not a concept; it's a tool, and it's a tool that we teach. And you were right to just, there's two words in there, and there's two components. It's actually just not a tool; it's a process for engaging clients. And so I'll repeat the definition because it's been a few minutes since I said it. So funded contentment
I don't have
is,
that long of a detention span, and I can't remember that well, so thank you.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, it's good. And I'm also, as I age, prone to repeat myself. So this is like a win-win scenario. Right?
Right.
So funded contentment is true wealth, or the ability to underwrite a life that's meaningful to you, however you choose to define that, and however you choose to or are compelled to update that through life's inevitable but unpredictable changes. And so there's two parts, funded and contentment. I think traditional advice anchors on funded. It anchors on the rich piece. Hey, I've got $1 million. I wish I had 2 million. You know, Dave, better than I do. When you get to 2 million, what does someone say? "Oh, 2.5 to 3 also sounds kind of nice." It's pretty hard to get off of that treadmill. Um, and so we don't, if we want to drive true wealth, wealth is a mindset. We don't focus on the funded. We take the contentment piece and we ask, having nothing to do with money. So it might be weird for a financial advisor to have conversations with clients that have nothing to do with money. But if at the end of the day, you are a servant leader and you're truly, serving this virtuous purpose to help people lead a meaningful, purpose-filled life, a content life, then contentment has um, four elements to it. Before I go into the four, I realized, let me make a really important distinction between contentment and happiness. Those are two very different things. Um, when I talk about happiness, or when I use the word happiness, that's daily mood. That's sort of, hey, I feel good. I got a dopamine hit. I woke up, I was cheerful or I was sad. It's sort of that short term disposition. It's what I've written about as what I call experienced happiness. It's right there in the moment and it comes and goes. It's fleeting. Contentment is more what I call, and there's a whole literature on the science of happiness called positive psychology, um, where contentment is reflective, meaning you're stepping back and thinking, okay, what is the life that I want to live? Am I living that life? How might I get to where I want to go? So when I talk about contentment, going way back 2,400 years or so to Aristotle, he used a Greek word, eudaimonia, which is sort of this deeper sense of living the good life. That's very different than, hey, I'm watching the Bulls or the Cubs play. They won the game. Awesome. I'm pretty happy about it. That's not eudaimonia. That is not content. So anyway, thanks for letting me level set that.
That's helpful.
In my analysis, what I've been writing about for years, based on philosophy, theology, neuroscience, psychology, many different cross-cutting disciplines, there's four sources of contentment. Call them the four C's, four sources of contentment. And what are those? Connection, control, competence, and context. I'll play it back using different words: belonging, autonomy, mastery, and purpose. But instead of calling it BAM, I call it the four C's. But the idea is that when you look at the stories we've told ourselves over the millennia, when you read philosophy, when you read religious texts, when you read modern psychology, the human experience and the good life tends to coalesce around four things: our connection to others. There's almost nothing more important than our tribal ties. I mean, small t, tribal, not the unfortunate capital T tribalness of some of our world right now, but that sense of belonging that we have. There's a book that was published just last year based on that 80-year study at Harvard over what made people happy over nearly a century. And it boiled down to two words: relationships matter. When we have a sense of connection and belonging, we tend to lead meaningful lives. The second of four, so that was connection, is control. It's the flip side of the coin. Yes, we want to be tied to others. Oh, guess what? We also want independence, opportunity, freedom. It's like hard to imagine life without it. So when I think about my favorite movie of all time, The Shawshank Redemption, Andy Dufresne is physically imprisoned, but spiritually free. And what's the concept that's central to that movie? It's hope, because he never loses hope. He has an element of freedom to him that evades almost all of the other prisoners. And so we have this deep seated, genetically wired sense of autonomy that wants some control over our lives. The third um, concept, the third C, is competence or mastery. This is just being really good at something that you find valuable. So, at the tip of the spear, we could think about those flow states that we find ourselves in sometimes, whether it's, working with a client or writing or playing guitar or pick whatever vocation, hobby, job. You look up, you realize it's been 2 hours, you forgot to eat, you forgot to use the washroom because you've just been so immersed. That is actually one of the most joyful states humans can enter. And that competence is that mastery over a value, vocation or craft, is the third of four C's. And the last one, what I call context, is the sense that the broader context of being connected to something bigger than ourselves over human history, that's tended to coalesce around two things, either faith or place. So whether it's religion or spirituality, just about everybody has some story about how they fit into the cosmos. And having that sense of where you fit is a deep source of meaning. Place, hometown pride. I've lived in Chicago for 30 plus years, but I grew up in Pittsburgh. I'm still a Steelers fan. And it's really meaningful to me to be from somewhere. Okay. Or it's your patriotism, it's your love of country. Those are really real things. And so connection, control, competence, context. These are the four deep sources of meaning that we can begin to explore. And I'll pause, but just preview what comes next. We then ask, where does money fit into those?
I love this because it's just perfect for our clients who are retirement and they're ending the what could be the competence part of their life with their expertise that they've done for the last 30 or 40 years at the career, but it needs to be replaced with something else
Something
and
else.
some other form of competence or expertise or passion. Um, all four of these, to have that meaningful retirement, a fulfilled retirement, or the funded contentment. These things are key, which is fantastic.
One of the exercises that we do with advisors, and in turn, your the advisor's clients, your clients' worksheets and guided explorations of this, is for each of the four C's. We have prompts and questions because it can be a little bit, I think, awkward and difficult for an advisor, especially for an advisor who is in the first third of their career, even first half of their career, just to lean into a conversation with a couple, maybe an older couple. What's your purpose in life? Okay. That doesn't go so well. That's a little bit awkward. But there's so many different, and we've got 20 questions for each of those four. So 80 questions that you can, keep in your hip pocket for, hey, this is something that, I want to, this is something that I'm going to want to talk about. One thing we've observed in the advisor client life cycle is that after a few years, things tend to be pretty okay. You've got the paperwork in order. There was usually some sort of situation, a brush fire, so to speak, that you're going to put out. Year 3, 4, 5, 10, 15. Probably things are in. And what do advisors say to us? I don't know what to talk about.
Yeah.
What, like, okay, it's year 14. I'm now 28 semi annual meetings in. I'm tapped out. Well, you're actually not tapped out because you can think about the transition from fine to flourish in very granular ways by asking questions like, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Clark, you know, um, when you come in, I'm really curious. I want to explore, I want to explore this question about, hey, if you had an extra $10,000 to donate, where would it go to? And so that's in the fourth C. That's in context. That's being connected to something bigger than yourself. Or on the control front, hey, what does autonomy or independence really mean to you? I mean, not every question is going to be right for every advisor, let alone client. But boy, what a deep well of content and opportunity to build relationships where you can help people to continue to reimagine the contentment piece of funded contentment. There's a lot, there's a lot of moving pieces.
I love that. And I know, and exactly what you said, I've been an advisor for 15 years. The meetings are great now. There's very little investment focused, right? There's some planning focus, but a lot of this stuff is moving along very smoothly. But thinking through, and I don't know if you'd recommend, go through the normal stuff, talk about the social stuff, and then the curious question around one of those things that you just said, those few examples. Ending the meeting on that note or diving into it, would you recommend asking those types of questions at the end? Would you recommend sending it to a person who's more of an introvert thinker before the meeting to sleep on? Any tips there? Going practical again, I guess that's how I think, but any
Well,
tips
we're
for
all
that?
everything we do is practical. I mean, look, give me philosophy, theology, neuroscience. I'll read it all day long. But at the end of the day, we're helping advisors build practice management workflows on how to be a better guide. So you want to be practical. We'll stay practical. The answer there, Dave, is that this is where, um, the advisor has to find her voice and her rhythm. One thing I like to tell advisors is that we're going to give you the words, but you have to find your voice. So we're going to talk to you about the 4 C's. We're going to share with you some of our bigger frameworks for what does it really mean to be a human being. And when we talk about something called behavioral finance, it's actually a distracting term that clouds what is actually there's a much more fruitful conversation about what does it mean to be human and the opportunities to help clients make better decisions, form better habits, be happier. So a lot of what we do, and my partner Joy, Dr. Joy Leary, who's PhD in psychology and a practicing clinician, in addition to a co-founder of Shaping Wealth, she always very powerfully but simply reminds us of 3 words: yours, mine, ours. Okay. And in any relationship, whether it's a clinical relationship or an advisory relationship or in a marriage, you name it, some of it's mine, some of it's yours, some of it's ours. And we owe it to each other and to ourselves to clearly delineate. So when I say, hey, here's one, I think, powerful, scalable framework for thinking about contentment, because we didn't even get to the funded piece. The funded piece is, okay, you've sort of defined at this moment what's meaningful. You could start to begin, well, what do those things cost? How do we underwrite them? How do we insure for them, et cetera, et cetera? How do we invest for them? We want to give our clients, who are financial advisors, very understandable, intuitive frameworks to drive better conversations about the things that really matter, to answer the one question that every client is asking in every meeting, which is simply, am I going to be okay? The most evolutionarily profound question: am I going to be okay? Our physical survival is usually pretty solid most days, thankfully. Our psychological safety in this day and age is at high risk. And so there's something that we call the paradox of prosperity, which is that we've never been richer, but we've also never really been more miserable. So why why is that happening? So our clients are showing up aggravated or worried about something, and we can intervene. So words versus voice. The coaching we do is to give people the words, how to use them. Let's practice. Let's role play. At the end of the day, such a long-winded answer to your good question, whether or not you or another advisor sends a question ahead of time, or does a surprise thing during the meeting, or does it in a follow-up, is the voice that you're finding in the practice management rhythm that you're built.
Okay, got it. But we just know the tools. We know we've got, like you said, the things in our back pocket to enter the way that fits best for us.
It
I like that. Um, do you have any other tips for someone, for an advisor who's been mainly focused, it has been investment focus.
eh,
The meeting is the investment review meeting. Let's just pretend it's one time a year, or maybe they do planning, income planning too. But the relationship as it stands now is they're coming to me for investment advice. I'm giving it to them and they feel fine. We've got a good relationship. It seems kind of difficult, or could be for some, to change it and stop the funded and start to think about the contentment side. Are there baby steps we take? Are there little, I don't know, lines we cast to see if they bite? How would you recommend starting it from nothing? You know what I mean? I don't know if that made sense.
it does make sense, and it's a good question. And, I'll make an observation about the industry globally because we're seeing firms in New Zealand and Los Angeles and Toronto and, the South Coast of England. I mean, there is a global movement toward human first advice because we know that the deeper the relationship, the, not only are you really showing up as a servant leader and helping others, you're also, from a profit margin point of view, building a wider moat. I mean,
Hmm.
this is the win-win. I mean, respectfully, if in 2024, if you're saying I can pick a better mutual fund than the next guy, chances are that's not particularly wide, particularly wide. So we I'll answer this through the lens of sort of some foundational programming we do for firms, called the Foundations of Behavioral Advice. And what I love about that program is that it is built for any employee of a wealth management firm. So just not advisors. And an advisor could be more investment focused. They could be more relationship driven. But this is a program where we've brought through hundreds of people, advisors, salespeople, marketers, back office, ops, IT. We've had firms send the entire team, CEO and his executive assistant. And what we're grappling with there, and this is the beginning of it, is three big questions. I'm better at questions than answers. What does it mean to be human? What does it mean to be a human with money? And what does it mean to guide others with their money? So the brain between our ears, we estimate, is more than 100,000 years old. Um, Money was invented about 3,000 years. I mean, there was exchange before that, but hard money as we now use it, the very first coin discovered was the Lydian coin, what is now Turkey. And that was about, I think, 2,700 years ago. So one reason why we have such difficulty making hard financial decisions is because we've got sort of, old, old software that's running, trying to process this new thing, and they just don't play very well together. So for the investment manager who might want to be leaning into financial planning, I think there's got to be some basic, and not just financial planning, but human first thing. There's got to be some basic curiosity about what makes us tick as humans. I used to be a portfolio manager that I was on that side of the business, mostly in the hedge fund space for many years. Good thing is there's a lot of smart, curious people on that side of the equation. And it's like, hey, come on over. Water's nice. There's a lot to learn. There's a lot of good work to do. And so today's not the day to fully explore what it means to be a human being. It's quite a big topic. But, appreciating that the terms rational and irrational are quite useless, in fact, harmful, is a starting point. Everybody is rational once you understand where they're coming from. Doesn't mean they're making a good decision. So, to us, we just like to say people are normal. Let's understand what it means to be normal because we are beautiful, but messy creatures. And understanding what that's all about is it's important and it's a lot of fun. Something else we've observed, maybe I'll just leave it at this, is that not everybody needs to lean into human first advice. There are lots of people in this industry who love the markets. They love investment management. Sure, they want to understand people better. But, if I make a distinction between mechanics and guides, technical experts and change agents or change navigators, some people like the mechanical skills. They want to be portfolio manager. That's totally fine. What we're seeing globally is experimentation with different business models inside different firms, where in some cases they say, hey, we want everybody to have a core set of both mechanic and guide skills. And in other firms, they say, nope, division of labor. You love that. You're good at that. Do that. And by the way, we're going to have somebody else on the team who is human first, relationship driven, went to a deeper level in terms of psychology and all the other related disciplines. And you're going to work as a team to drive amazing client experiences. I don't think there's a right answer. It's like when I was an investor, portfolio manager, and then wrote, somewhat extensively about sort of the art and science of investing from a behavioral point of view. There's no one right way to invest, but everybody has a right way for them. And
Yeah.
discovering that, going through that self-awareness journey is super helpful.
Okay. Thank you for that. I've got one more question, unless there's anything I did not ask that would be helpful for the advisors. But it's different.
Y-
Uh, I know you've got kind of a. It seems like you're looking into the future a bit, and I think you know where this question's going. But how should you had mentioned what it means to be a human, right?
It,
And we're thinking about AI is
yeah.
the hot topic. How should advisors be thinking about it? How how should we be thinking about the next 5 years, as it relates to what you do or not? Just your own personal thoughts about it.
Yeah. Well, we think about it a lot because we have a very serious, we have a not small initiative in artificial intelligence right now. And funny enough, it's called Lydia.
Oh, well.
Yeah. So we named it after the first coin, but she's also a guide. She's a guide to the guide. So when you take what me and Neil and Joy and Meg have put together, Shaping Wealth, in terms of coaching and guidance, content for the advisor, but then bake it into a very sophisticated, technology. We have a partner, a California-based partner, who's been in the AI and machine learning space for more than 20 years. Their tech, our content, chocolate, peanut butter, Reese's, comes together in terms of a technology that we call Lydia, which is basically a series of conversation agents and also business intelligence tools. You know, um, among other things, Dave, you're going to a meeting later today with a couple that you know pretty well. You've been counseling them for a long time. But it might be a hard conversation and you want to run your questions by somebody. Lydia is trained to be your conversation partner and very fine tuned in different psychological models. And it will likely have with you a very productive conversation where you could bounce your ideas off of someone on the fly. That's one of many use cases. Stepping further back, not about Lydia or shaping well, my view is that there are two stories out there that are happening. The first is an efficiency story. The second is an effectiveness story. I would say 99% of the AI initiatives that we see in the wealth space are about efficiency. It's about wills and trusts and portfolios and insurance. And it's making workflows shorter, making workflows less error prone. It's great. I mean, it's going to make a massive difference in the way that a lot of firms run themselves over time. That is AI as a replacement strategy, meaning, oh, you had five people in your back office. Now we need just two. Um, is what it is. Let's not even judge it. This is the history of technology going back centuries. Technology tends to replace people. And then those people move on to higher value add jobs. And, when I think about, I mentioned earlier, my hometown is Pittsburgh. The steel industry was dominant. And then for a few different reasons, it went away and was replaced by medical technology and robotics and hospitals and a lot of things. So this is the nature of technology and change. I think question on my mind and what should be on many advisors' mind is, well, how can you use this to be a better version of you? Most people aren't looking to replace themselves. Most people are looking for tools that augment themselves. And I think the effectiveness or augmentation story is not nearly as well explored and told. And that's the area that I've been writing and doing some speaking this fall on.
Oh, so you're writing about it now? How can we find those writings?
Well, when they're published, it'll be at shapingwealth.com. So there's nothing to point to yet. I have lots of scribbles in lots of open Google documents, but I think is this the biggest innovation since the internet? I mean, I think the conventional wisdom is yes. Do we really know what this thing is? I think the conventional wisdom is correct. The answer is no. But we know just even if we just play around a little bit with ChatGPT or with Claude Sonnet or any of the other prompt engines, that this can be incredibly powerful. And like any new disruptive technology, we are not just victims of the trend. We are actually agents with choice. And we can lean in and try to, use this technology for positive benefits. So I'm actually pretty bullish on the positive impact that AI can make for the advice business. I think it might hold the chance to provide even more good advice at larger scale to even more people.
Yeah. And I like the fact that what you're doing around empathy and emotional intelligence and these sorts of conversations, sure, the AI will be able to have the conversations too, and will feel like it's empathetic, right? It
Hmm.
ranks pretty well at that. But as a human, we'll know that it's not real empathy. It's not really feeling the thing. And I think there'll always be a want or a need to have the human experience around these deep, deep discussions. That's one good thing, and why we should really become masters of this. What's your
Yeah, I
take?
think it's such an important point. I'm not going to argue or even challenge, but I do think that here's my analogy: self-driving cars is the right way to evaluate them based on them having zero accidents, or should our base rate be how many accidents do human drivers have? I think it's the latter. So, as it relates to AI and empathy, should the benchmark be sort of zero, or should it be what us messy, sometimes not very kind humans can be to each other? I think it should be that. And so, what I've seen in the raw technology is that advisors that the AI can portray itself as empathy and as such be empathetic. And if it's being delivered via email or blog or text or chat, and you don't know whether or not technically whether there's a a human being on the other side of that or it's just AI generated, really what is the difference between the non-human versus the true human empathy? I don't know, Dave. I struggle with it, but I actually think there's a winning scenario for real humans here if they understand the capability and limitations of the technology and use it to their benefit.
That's good. That's good news. What's the next step? I got a great idea of all the great things you're doing. What can I do next? You mentioned
Mhm,
shapingwealth.com. There's a lot of free resources on there.
mhm.
What's the next? How do I get more info? How do I go deeper?
Yeah, yeah. So we run everything from a free content platform to immersive coaching programs. If you go to shapingwealth.com, there's an experiences tab there that, shows you a lot of the things that we do. Our immersive coaching program is called Building the Behavioral Advisor. Cohort 11 starts September 24th of 2024. The next cohort is in mid-January of 2025. All of that's on the site. I mentioned this foundations of behavioral advice. It's very inexpensive course. It's built to create a very big tent to start thinking about teams and culture and human advice. Um, our next cohort for that is, I believe, October 23rd. So we're excited for that. And the last thing I'll note is that every year we do a virtual behavioral finance summit where it's free. There's 3 hours of CE credit. And our keynote speakers this year are Morgan Housel, Kyla Scanlon, and Jem Carsan, plus Jason Pereira and Valerie Rivera. So five superstars, each in their own vein, talking about different elements of human advice. And the whole thing's free. Each person talks for no more than 30 minutes. So it's kind of a quick hit format. And there you just need, just go to shapingwealth.com and there's a big registration button for that. And
Are you going to be
um,
speaking on it?
yeah, there's going to be 6 30-minute sessions. And the final session is me and my team, Neil, Meg, and Joy. And we're going to do a behavioral finance state of the union. We're going to reflect on what we learned from Morgan and Kyla and everybody else. But we're also going to step back and, as I did a little bit today, comment on the global trend in human first financial guidance.
Excellent. Thanks for sharing this. Thanks for the practical tips. And yeah, this is pretty amazing. I'm just looking at my notes right now. I was looking down, by the way, taking notes. I wasn't getting bored. This has been great,
I
Brian.
saw your shoulder wiggle. Yeah, I've done this enough to know when you're not having a
Going
spasm,
serious.
but actually writing. So I get it. It's all good. It's all good. No, Dave, these were fantastic questions.
Awesome. Thanks, Brian.
You bet.